I once saw a cartoon that's always stuck with me. It illustrated a staircase that was rising from the earth into the heavens. Ascending along that staircase in single file were all of the days dearly departed. Now, when they got above the clouds, they entered into heaven's waiting room. And once in that great lobby, there were these zigzagging rope lines that you might see at a place like Disney. People making their way through to the big doors that were at the head of the line. Doors like you might see in a cathedral. There's a standard in front of the doors that says, "Thank you for your patience. We will be with you for your final judgment momentarily." Now the fellow at the head of the line, upon reading that sign, happens to look down at the shirt he's wearing that day. A t-shirt. And he says, "Oh my goodness, of all days, to wear this shirt." The words emblazoned on the front of his t-shirt were "holier than thou." Now, it's a thinking person's cartoon, and I hope that the point doesn't miss you. Where I think it goes to the very heart of what Paul is trying to say to us today in his writing. The church in Paul's day was a very contentious community. They loved a church fight, and they would fight over anything and everything. Now, our latter-day church probably isn't much different. The only thing that's changed is what we argue about today, rather than our disposition to argue. Church in Paul's day was experiencing a growth spurt. Some of the new followers of Jesus were Jews. Many others were pagan Gentiles. Then, like in a marriage, people were coming together with different histories, different stories, different traditions, different habits, and they had to learn how to live together. Not an easy task in marriage, and not an easy task in the community of the church. Some people felt that to be a follower of the way, as we were known back then, you first had to be a Jew. Others say, now you can be anything, just got to believe in Jesus. Some people were ardent followers of the Jewish Sabbath. Others said, well, every day is holy and belongs to God. Some people were meat eaters. Other people disturbed the potlucks by bringing vegetable dishes. Let people eat what they wanted to eat. Some believed in fasting. Others said, well, fasting makes no difference at all. Some people thought churches in the carpet ought to be blue. Others thought they ought to be red. And others thought they ought to be brownish white. Arguing. And Paul had to become like the referee. And when the problem was that people stopped debating and arguing over theology and started to argue over personality. Like today, if you don't agree with someone, forget the facts, just raise your voice and call them a nasty name. That should solve the argument just fine, shouldn't it? The arguments in the church had degenerated to the point of people arguing over who was holier than thou. You can do that. No, you can't. I can. Yes, I can. No, I won't. No, you can't. and on and on and on till heaven had a headache. And all degenerated to holier than thou. We thought that was going to be the crucial question of the new community. The church of the early days and our church today often reminds me of plots that I've seen worked out in that old TV show MASH. Always been a favorite of mine. Still love all the reruns. A MASH unit is that field hospital where with immediacy, pain, suffering, injury are dealt with. Seems to me that should be something about what the church should be about, dealing with those kinds of issues. Well, if you remember Colonel Potter, he's sort of like the Paul figure in those episodes. He has to work out the conflicts between characters like Majors Houlihan and Burns, who want to do everything one way, the Army way, the regulation way, by the book way. Right? Got a lot of people in the Army like that, right? Then there were Captains Honeycutt and Pierce, who couldn't give a hoot about the Army way, the regulation way, the book way, if it interfered with their primary concern, and that was dealing with that injured GI who was before them. So Potter has to sort of be the referee between the conflicts. And he has to lift up what will serve best both the unity of the unit and the welfare of the patient. Like Paul has to lift up before the conflicts of his day the unity of the church and the glory of God's name. Paul would tell us, it doesn't make any difference what your opinion is. But what you should be doing is seeing that all that you do and all that you think in your Christian liberty and conscience is being done for the welfare of the community and, more importantly, to give glory to God. How many of our church arguments give God a lot of glory? Even more, a great headache. Paul says, why do you pass judgment on your brothers and sisters? Why do you despise your brothers and your sisters? Don't you realize that we all together stand under the judgment of God? When we get to that moment of our final judgment, do any of us really want to be wearing that t-shirt that reads, holier than thou? I don't think so. Paul would say, it makes no difference if you're living by the book, by the rules, by God's grace. What makes a difference is in whatever you're doing. Is it giving glory to God? Don't be concerned about your neighbor's judgment. Be concerned about your own judgment. That's when you have an ability to help control how you live your life. How your neighbor chooses to live theirs. That can be a concern to us, but it's going to be their responsibility. When we get to those doors of the kingdom, God is not really going to be concerned about anything else but whether or not we gave him the glory, and whether or not our knee bowed before his holy name. God seems only to be concerned with asking us one question. How did you and I live in the shadow of his grace, giving him the glory and giving honor and respect to our neighbors? Now, when that question is asked of us, will you be on your knee, or will your ego have you standing tall with your holier-than-thou t-shirt? We have only one task, and that is in everything we do to give God the glory. Bach signed all of his works. To God goes the glory. It's not our human effort, it's God's effort. How do we live in the shadow of that grace that was cast upon all of creation from a cross? Hopefully it is very, very humbly. Martin Luther was fond of his, attributed to his last words. In the end, he said, we are all beggars upon God's grace. Isn't that the truth? You and I are beggars upon the grace. Leave your holier-than-thou t-shirt stashed in the deepest, darkest drawer you can find in your house, and stand before the throne of the Almighty, simply thankful that his grace covered each and every sin you possibly could have committed during the course of your lifetime. Welcome into my presence. It's the invitation of heaven, for I have covered all your sin and love you with the depth of my heart. Holier than thou doesn't really work in the church. Sounds good sometimes, but it usually tears down more than it builds up. And we put the arguments and the opinions to the side. God's not going to quibble with us over our opinions. He's just going to want to know, how well did we live for his glory and his honor in service to his creation? The only opinion in the end that matters is God's. Let's help him be proud of the way we lived our lives. Only we can control that. May to God go the glory, and may our knees bow forth in respect and honor. May his Spirit make it possible within his entire church, for we need it so very, very much. So we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.